Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is Discerning What is True. Today is the third day of February 2023, and I want to share this live program with you about a particular book that I have here called America's Secret Establishment, An Introduction to the Order of Skull and Bones by Antony G. Sutton, S-U-T-T-O-N. Antony G. Sutton, I'm sorry, I said C. I meant to say C. I'm sorry, C. Sutton. This particular book I have here, it's a book I have here at home. And what he does simply is, I'm going to go a little bit and share a little bit about it. This takes place at Yale. That's Yale University. It's been taking place since 1832. And some of the well-to-do families now who were part of this were the people such as the Phelps family, the Aldrich family, the Buckley family, the Bush family, the Bundys, the Cheneys, the Daniels, the Davisons, the Dodge family, the Gates family, the Goodyear family, the Gould, Harriman, Kellogg, Lord, Lovett, Luce, L-U-C-E, Phelps, Pinchot, Rockefeller, Stimson, Taft, Vanderbilt, Weyerhaeuser, and Whitney. It's just some of the names he has here. So what I'm going to do is just explain to this. Antony C. Sutton has written many books, folks. He's written a ton of books, to be honest with you. So let me just give you a rundown of his books so you have an idea. Some of these books are still available. This particular book I have right here, I got from Trine Day, Trineday. They're located out of Ohio. It's just www. Trine, Trine, Day, D-A-Y, com, C-O-M. So this is one of the books they have here. This is a reprint, more up to date. He has done books called Technological Treason, The Diamond Connection, Gold versus Paper, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, The War on Gold, Energy, The Created Crisis, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, Wars and Revolutions, Parts 1 and 2, Wall Street and Franklin D. Roosevelt, Trilaterals over Washington, Volume 1 and Volume 2, Western Technology of Soviet Economic Development, Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development 2, it's from 1930 to 1945, Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development from 1945 to 1965. If you don't understand what he just shared, these three books, they're basically the Western technology has been given to the Soviet Union at that time. And National Suicide, Military Aid to the Soviet Union, Introduction to the Order, How the Order Controls Education, How the Order Creates War and Revolution, The Secret Cult of the Order, and The Best Enemy Money Can Buy. As far as I know, Antony C. Sutton is alive, I think, but I'll just check here on Wikipedia and give you that real quick for you. He was alive actually in 2002. Well, actually, he did pass away in 2002. He was a British-American writer, researcher, and economist and professor. He was also he studied at universities at University of London, University of Gottingen, Gottingen, and University of California, Los Angeles, and received his doctorate in science from the University of Southampton. Sutton became an economic professor at California State University of Los Angeles. He had a research fellowship at Stanford University at Hoover Institute on War, Revolution, and Peace from 68 to 73. At the Hoover Institute, he wrote the study Western Technology and Soviet Economic Developments in 3 volumes, arguing that the West played a major role in developing the Soviet Union from its beginning until the then president of 1970. Sutton argues that the Soviet Union technology and manufacturing base, which was then engaged in supplying North Korea during the Vietnam War, was built by the United States corporations and largely funded by U.S. taxpayers. Steel and iron plants, the GAZ automobile factory, a Ford subsidy in eastern Russia, and many other Soviet industrial enterprises were built with the help or technical assistance of the U.S. government and the U.S. corporations. He argued further that the Soviet Union acquisition of MIRV, that is MIRV, multiple re-entry vehicle technology was made possible by receiving, that is, from machining equipment from the manufacturer of precision ball bearings necessary to mass produce MIRV enabled missiles. He does say something here that by Ayn Rand, I advertised the first volume of this book for sale in the Objectives book service for $9 alongside a review of the work by Robert Hesson, and she published in the Objectivism. Anyway, let me go ahead and get into the book now, okay? After 16 books and 25 years in basic research, I thought I'd heard it all. The world was a confused mess, probably beyond understanding and certainly beyond salvation, and there was little I could do about it. Back in 1968, my Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development was published by the Hoover Institute at Stanford University in 3 substantial volumes. I detail how the West had built the Soviet Union. However, the work generated a seemingly insolvable puzzle. Why had we done this? Why did we build the Soviet Union? While we also transferred technology to Hitler's Germany? Why does Washington want to conceal these facts? Why have we boosted Soviet military power and simultaneously boost our own? In subsequently books, the Wall Street series, I added more questions, more or no answers, that is. I had more or less arrived at the conclusion that there was no rational answer that could be proven. Then a year or so ago, I received an 8-inch batch of documents, nothing less than the membership list of the American Secret Society. Glancing through the sheets, as it was more than obvious, this was no ordinary group. The names spell power with a capital P. As I probed each individual, a pattern emerged, and a formerly fuzzy world became crystal clear. The book you will read here is a combined version of a series of reporting on this research. Each volume builds on the previous volume in a logical step-by-step process. 3 volumes will explain why the West built the Soviets and Hitler, why we go to war to lose, why Wall Street loves Marxists and Nazis, why the kids can't read, why the churches have become propaganda fountains, why historical facts are suppressed, and why politicians lie in 100 other ways. This was based upon Antony Sutton in Phoenix, Arizona, on July 30th, 1983. The introduction to this particular edition, 2002, this book began with anonymous donations to the author of an 8-inch package of documents in the early 1980s, as I was just talking about. Nothing less than the membership list and supporting documents for a truly secret society, the Yale Skull and Bones. The late Johnny Johnson of Phoenix, Arizona, was the spark that moved me to write first a 4-part series and later a jumbo volume based on this material. This volume went to several editions with several publishers, even a Russian edition of 12,000 copies. Probably in the past few years, as many copies have been sold in Russia as it is in the United States. American Secret Establishment has had little publicity. Few reviews, nor my mainline distributions yet, has sold steadily for the past 16 years at a rate of several hundred copies a month. This activity in turn has generated other articles and books by other authors. But my real intent to generate an exploration of the Hegelian influence in modern America has not been fulfilled. In great part, that is, this can be attributed to an educational system based on statist Hegelian philosophy, which has already achieved the dumbing down of America. This disastrous, destructive philosophy, the source of both Nazism and Marxism has infected and corrupted our constitutional republic. Much of the blame for this corruption is with a elitist group of Yale bonesmen. Their symbol of skull and bones and their Hegelian philosophy says it all, although with typical duplicity, they would have you believe otherwise. Hegelianism glorifies the state, the victim for dissemination of status and material ideas and policies in education, science, politics, and economics. Wonder why we have a dumbed-down society? Look no further than the bonesman Trotsky, who imported the Prussian educational system into the U.S. in the 19th century. You know who that is? He's speaking of Horace Mann, Horacemann. A political philosophy in direct opposition to the classical liberalism nurtured in the 19th century British and American history at one time. In classical liberalism, the state is always subordinate to the individual. In Hegelian statism, as we see in Nazism and Marxism, the state is supreme and the individual exists only to serve the state. Our two-party system, that is Republican/Democrat, equals one Hegelian party. No one else welcome or allowed system is a reflection of this Hegelianism. A small group, or very small group, that is, by using Hegel, can manipulate and to some extent control society for its own purposes. More than that, reflect on their pirate flag, an emblem found on poison bottles, the symbol of the Nazi Death Head Division in World War II. Not only did skull and bones become a major factor in drug smuggling, that is the Bushes and the Prescott families in the 1860s, but in true Hegelian fashion generated the antithesis, so-called war on drugs. You see, that's what they put out front, when in reality simply they kept bringing drugs in, folks. It's a bunch of bullshit. They're just traitors. They're traitors to your country. This hypocritical policy maintains the price of drugs, controls supplies, and puts millions in jail, while the gainers, them, in great part, are none other than the same bonesmen who passed the laws to prohibit these people. This is from Bonesman Taft, T-A-F-T, 1904. Right and left, a control device. For Hegelians, the state is almighty and as seen as the march of God on earth. Indeed, a state religion, that is. Progress in the Hegelian state is to contrive conflict. The clash of oppositions makes for progress. If you can control the opposites, you dominate the nature of its outcome. We trace the extraordinary skull and bone influences in major Hegelian conflicts, Nazis versus communism. Skull and Bones members were in the dominant decision-making positions: Bush, Harriman, Stimson, LaBelle, and so on. All bonesmen and instrumental in guiding the conflict through use of right and left. They finance and encourage the growth of both philosophies and control the outcome to a significant extent. This was aided by the reductionist division in science, the opposite of historical wholeness. By dividing science and learning into narrow segments, it became easier to control the whole through the parts. In education, the Dewey system was initiated and promoted by Skull and Bones members. Dewey was an ardent statist and a believer in the Hegelian idea that the child exists to be trained to serve the state. I'll say that again. Dewey was an ardent statist and a believer in the Hegelian idea that the child exists to be trained to serve the state. This requires suppression of individualistic tendencies and a careful spoon-feeding of approved knowledge. This dumbing down of American education is not easily apparent unless you have studied in both foreign and domestic U.S. universities. Then the contrast becomes very clear. This dumbing down is now receiving attention. Two excellent books are The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America by Charlotte Thompson Iserby and The Dumbing Down of America by John Taylor Gatto. Both books trace this process to the impact of education, and both give remarkable detail of the process. We go further in that we trace the import of the system to these three Yaleans, members of Skull and Bones. For Iserby, in Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, the American education system begins with Rockefeller and Gates. But in fact, the statist system is a reflection of Hegelian ideas brought to the United States by the Skull and Bone Trotsky of Gilman, White, and Dwight, and then financed by Rockefeller. People control. Today in California, one can see in real time the use of controlled conflict to achieve a desired outcome. The debate over the energy crisis is carefully contained to a debate over price caps and price controls. Republicans want no caps and no controls. Most Democrats want price controls through caps. But look at what is not discussed anywhere: the entire spectrum of almost free energy, based on a decade of research and carefully kept out of discussion. Isn't this highly relevant to an energy crisis? In fact, the existence of free energy systems just down to the road is the reason for the controlled debate. That is, Mills Blacklight Power now has its patents, and some utilities have already bought into Bearden's MEG energy from space is under discussion. Working models exist. The malignant cold fusion has hundreds of successful experiments, but so far as we know, cannot be repeated with sufficient assurance. Other systems have come into view of government agencies and then disappear from sight. Yeah, they don't want it. They don't want that, you see. A knowing public would ask, why are these not included in the discussions? Simply because the utilities know they are for real and only a few years down the road. The problem for utilities is not the price of energy today, but how to dump their fixed access, the hydro plants, the transmission lines onto the public. These valuable assets will have zero value down the road because all new systems are standalone units which don't need fixed plants and transmission lines. If the public is aware of the dilemma of the utilities, the ability to dump assets onto the state is heavily reduced. The Republican-Democrat debate over caps is a diversion. The relevant questions carefully avoided is how long will it take to get these new systems into production? Another example is Monsanto Corporation development of genetic engineering and predator seeds, a barely concealed effort for world domination of agriculture. President George Bush Jr., that is, a bonesman himself, appoints a Monsanto Vice President, Dr. Virginia Weldon, as Director of Food and Drug Administration. Wow, isn't that cool, isn't it? Which has the power to block labeling of genetic engineering foods and pass on to other corporate control efforts. They're all bought, folks. They're all bought. Just before this, in new technology, we had the 1989 dramatic announcement of cold fusion. When this announcement was made public, President George Bush, and also a bonesman, called established scientist the late physicist Seagram into his office and gave instructions. We don't know what was said, but we know what happened. Cold fusion, a value process for free energy, as was essentially revealed, was slandered and harassed by the establishment, no doubt fearfully of what free energy would do to the oil industry. Yeah. But there's plenty of oil too, folks, you see. But why do we have to pay for anything on this planet? That's the real question, in my opinion. Why do we have to pay for anything on this planet? What is to be done? If the voting public was ever even vaguely aware of the rampant and concealed scenario, it could and possibly would force change. However, this is not a likely possibility. Most people are go-alongs. They go along with the program, you see, types, with limited personal objectives and high threshold for official misdeeds. What has taken over a century to establish cannot be changed in a few years, folks. The initial question is education, that is, to eliminate the Hegelian system that stifles individual initiative and trains children to become mindless zombies serving the states. We need a lot less propaganda for education and a more individual creative search for learning. Instead of more money for education, we need to allocate a lot less. The existing system of education is a little more than a conditioning mechanism. It has little to do with education in its true sense and a lot to do with control of the individual. It's more likely that time, rather than the voting group, will erode the secret power of this Yale group. Nothing this outrageous, nothing that this outrageous can survive forever. It's from Antony Sutton. Introduction to the order, the skull and bones. Interesting. It's a pirate flag, you see. Memorandum number 1, is there a conspiracy explanation for recent history? The readers anxious to get into the story of the order should go directly to Memorial number 2. This section concerns methods, evidence, and proof, essentially, but perhaps boring for most readers. During the past 100 years, any theory of history or historical evidence that falls outside a pattern established by the American Historical Association and major foundations with their grand-making power has been attacked or rejected. not on the basis of any evidence presented, but on the basis of acceptability of the argument of the so-called Eastern liberal establishment and its official historical line. Yes, yes, indeed. Same thing happened, as we know, that there have been researchers in the that have found giants all across this whole planet. And so what's taking place simply was this whole idea was ejected by the Smithsonian Institute. And so the Smithsonian Institute said they would take the stuff, but they threw it away. The bodies, the skeletons, they threw it all away, or it's hidden somewhere. There is establishment history, an official history, which dominates history desk books, trade publishing, the media, and library shelves. The official line always assumes that events such as wars, revolutions, scandals, assassinations are more or less random, unconnected events. No, they're not, folks. They're never random, never will be. By definition, events can never be the result of a conspiracy. They can never result from premeditated planned group actions. An excellent example is the Kennedy assassination, when within 9 hours of Dallas tragedy, TV networks announced the shooting was not a conspiracy, regardless of the fact that a negative proposition can never be proven, and that the investigation had barely even begun. They do this every time, folks, and you follow the rabbit all the time. You don't have a fucking brain, do you? I'm sorry, but I just have to say it. You won't wake up. You won't see, you see, because you're brainwashed. You're completely brainwashed. Woe betide any book or author that falls outside the official guidelines. Foundation support is not there. Publishers get cold feet. Distribution is hit and miss or non-existent. Thus, to ensure the official line dominates, in 1946, the Rockefeller Foundation allotted $139,000 for an official history of World War II. This to avoid a repeat of debunking history books which embarrassed the establishment after World War I. The reader will be interested to know that the order we are all about to investigate has great foresight back into the 1880s. To create both the American Historical Association and the American Economic Association. Most economists were then, most historians then analysis under their terms with the people and their objections. Andrew Dickinson White was a member of the order and the first president of the American Historical Association. Failure of official history. Times have changed. The weaknesses, inconsistencies, and plain untruths in official history has surfaced. In the 1980s, it is rare to find a thinking reader who accepts official history. Most believe it has been more or less packaged for mass consumption by naive or greedy historians. Although as historians who would stick out his neck and buck this trend is rare. Some who do are victims of an even deeper game, you see. Conspiracy then is an accepted explanation for many events at the intelligent grassroots level, that level farthest removed from the influence of the order. We can cite it at random, the Kennedy assassination, where the official lone gunman theory was never accepted by Americans in the street. Watergate, where a deep-throat informer and erased tapes seek real of conspiracy. And Pearl Harbor, where Rear Admiral Husband E. Kimmett and Major General Walter C. Short took the rap for Generals George C. Marshall and President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The revisionist historians have a double burden as well as a double task. The double burden is that research likely to question this official historical line will not get financed. The double task is that every research must be more than usually carefully and precise. A non-official work is not going to be judged on its merits. The work will be judged on the basis of its acceptability to a predetermined historical standard, you see. What this standard is, we shall explore later. Hypocrisy and method. Which brings us to methodology. In this volume, we present three hypotheses. What is a hypothesis? A hypothesis is a theory, a working theory, a start point, which has to be supported by evidence. We arrive at these three hypotheses by examining certain documents will always be described. The critical official history hatchet mongers will scream that our hypotheses are now being presented as proven assertions. And whatever we write here will not stop the screams. But again, they're only hypotheses at this point. They have to be supported with evidence. They are a first step in a logical research process. Now, in scientific methodology, a hypothesis can be proven. It cannot be disproven. It is up to the reader to decide whether the evidence presented later supports or does not support the hypothesis. Obviously, no one, author, critic, or reader can decide either way until all the evidence has been presented. We also intend to use two other principles of scientific research ignored by official establishment historians. Firstly, in science, the simplest explanation to a problem is always the most acceptable solution. By contrast, in established history, a simple answer is usually criticized as simplistic. What the critic implies is the poor writer hasn't used all the facts. In other words, it's cheap, put down, without the necessity of providing an alternate answer or additional facts. Second, again, in science, and an answer that fits the most cases, i.e. the most general answer, is also the most acceptable answer. For example, you have 12 events to explain a theory that fits 11 of these events. That theory is more acceptable than a theory that fits only 4 or 5 of the events. Hold on just a second here. I'm going to change the screen a little bit. The devil theory of history. Using this methodology, we are going to argue and present detailed, precise evidence, including names, dates, and places, that the only reasonable explanation for recent history in the United States is that there exists a conspiracy to use political power for ends which are inconsistent with the Constitution. This is known by the official historians as the devil theory of history, which again is a quick, cheap device for brushing facts under the rug. However, these critics ignore, for example, the Sherman Act, i.e., the antitrust laws, where conspiracy is the basic accepted theory. If there can be a conspiracy in the marketplace, then why not in the political arena, folks? Are politicians any purer than businessmen? Further, the antitrust laws, we know that conspiracy can only be proven in proven in a specific manner. A similar pattern of market actions is not proof of conspiracy. Just because something looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and all the ducks act similar does not make it a duck or a conspiracy. Under the Sherman Act, a similar pattern of prices where all prices are the same is not proof of conspiracy. Similarly, prices can occur in a purely competitive market. Neither similar political action is necessarily a conspiracy. Proof of conspiracy requires specific types of evidence. There must be secret meetings of the participants and efforts made to conceal joint action. B. Those meetings must jointly agree to take a course of action. 3. And this action must be illegal. The Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, which is actually a stepsister to the RIIA in Britain. And actually, the RIIA actually dominates and tells the CFR what to do. Widely accepted explanation of recent history based on conspiracy theory do not present evidence that fits the above criteria. For example, the Council on Foreign Relations cannot be claimed as a conspiracy even for the period since its founding in 1921. Membership in the CFR is not a secret. Membership lists are freely available for the cost of a postage stamp. There is no proof that the entire membership conspires to commit illegal acts. What has to be proven is any conspiracy explanation of history is that the participants have secret groupings and meet to plan illegal actions. Members of the CFR, when accused of being involved in a conspiracy, have protested to the contrary, and by and large, they are right. Most CFR members are not involved in the conspiracy and have no knowledge of any conspiracy at all. And some personalities known to the author are about the last people on earth to get involved in a legal conspiracy. However, there is a group within the Council of Foreign Relations which belongs to a secret society, sworn to secrecy, which more or less controls the CFR. CFR meetings are used for their own purposes, i.e. to push out ideas, weigh up people who might be useful to use meetings as a forum for discussion. These members are in the order. You see, their membership in the order can be proven. Their meetings can be proven. Their objectives are plainly unconstitutional, and this order has existed for over 150 years in the United States. Memorandum number 2. The order, what it is and how it began. Those on the inside know it as the order. Others have known it for more than 150 years as Chapter 322 of Germany's secret society. More formally, for legal purposes, the order was incorporated as the Russell Trust in 1856. It was also once known as the Brotherhood of Death. Those who might make light of it or want to make fun of it call it the Skulls and Bones, or just plain Bones. The American chapter of this German order was founded in 1833 at Yale University by General William Huntington Russell and Alphonso Taft, who in 1876 became Secretary of War in the Grant administration. Alphonso Taft was the father of William Howard Taft, the only to be both President and Chief Justice of the United States. What is the order? The order is not just another campus Greek letter fraternity society with passwords and hand grips, commonly to most campuses. Chapter 322 is a secret society whose members are sworn to silence. It only exists on the Yale campus that we know about. It has rules. It has ceremonial rights. It is not at all happy with prying, probing citizens, known among initiates as outsiders or vandals. Its members always deny membership or are supposed to deny membership, and in checking hundreds of autobiography listings for members, we found only a half a dozen who cited affiliation with Skull and Bones. The rest were not. An interesting point is whether the major members in various administrations who hold government positions have declared their members in the biographical data supplied for FBI background checks. Above all, the order is powerful, unbelievably powerful it is. If the reader will persist and examine the evidence to be presented, which is overwhelming, there is no doubt this view of the world will suddenly come simply into focus with almost frightening clarity. Before we go further, we need to add a couple of important observations about the order. It is senior year society, which exists only at Yale. Members are chosen in their junior year and spend only 1 year on campus. The senior year with Skull and Bones, that is the the senior year, which Skull and Bones. In other words, the organization is oriented to the postgraduate outside world. The order meets annually, patriots only, on Deer Island in the St. Lawrence River. Senior societies are unique to Yale. There are only 2 other senior societies at Yale, but none elsewhere. Scroll and Key and Wolf's Head are supposedly competitive societies founded in the mid-19th centuries. We believe these to be part of the same network. Rosenbaum commented in his Esquire article very accurately that anyone in the Eastern liberal establishment who is not a member of Skull and Bones is almost certainly a member of either Scroll and Key or Wolf's Head. Interesting, isn't it? What is the significance of the 322 in Chapter 322? William Russell imported this society from Germany, and so it has been argued that 32 stands for 32 from 1832, the second chapter of this German organization. Possibly a Chapter 320 and Chapter 321 may exist somewhere else, and 323 is a designation of a room within the Skull and Bones Temple at Yale. Another interpretation is that the order is descended from a Greek fraternity society dating back to Demosthenes, I'll spell that to you, Demosthenes in 322 BC. This is perhaps some credibility because Bones records are dated by adding 322 to the current year, i.e., records originated in 1950 are dated Anno Demonstratio 2272. How the memory is chosen by the order. The selection procedure for new members of the order has not changed since 1832. Each year, 15 and only 15, never more, never fewer, are selected. In the past 150 years, that is about 2,500 Yale graduates have been initiated into the order. At any one time, about 500 to 600 are alive and active. Roughly about 1/4 of these take an active role in furthering the objectives of the order. The others either lose interest or change their minds. They're silent dropouts. A Yale junior cannot ask to join. There is no electioneering. Juniors are invited to join and are given 2 options, accept or reject. Apparently, some amount of personal information is gathered on potential members. The following is the kind of evaluation made in the last century. We doubt it has changed too much down to the present day. Frank Moore is an ideal bonesman. He is hardworking and a man whose efforts have been more for Yale than himself. He's a manager of the musical clubs and has been active at the Dwight Hall. His election will be well-deserved and popular. Don Thompson is a sure man whom the class wishes well for and will be glad to see him go. He comes from a Bones family. His selection emphasis is placed on athletical ability, the ability to play on a team. The most unlikely potential member of the order is a loner, a iconoclast, a individualist, a man who goes his own way in the world. The most likely potential member is from a Bones family, who is energetic, resourceful, political, and probably a moral team player. Amoral, not immoral, but amoral. A man who understands that to get along, you have to go along. A man will sacrifice himself for the good of the team. A moment reflections illustrates why this is so. In real life, the thrust of the order is to ring about certain objectives. Honors and financial rewards are guaranteed by the power of the order, but the price of these honors and rewards is sacrificed to the common good. The common goal, the goal of the order. Some, perhaps many, have not been willing to pay this price. Remember, some of these players, some of these people who are what we call are athletes, are team players. If you noticed that anything in college, that is, a lot of times there are basketball teams, there's baseball teams, there's what we call football teams, and other things that are team sports. And usually they belong to those type of groups. They're not what you call like a fighter or a boxer or something of that nature, you see. So they're always a team player. They will give. Like we know that Gerald Ford played football, and he was a offensive lineman as well as I recollect. So that just gives you an illustration. There are other players, just such and such. So inside the order, that is. Entry into the order is accompanied by elaborate ritual and no doubt by psychological conditioning, for example. Immediately on entering Bones, the epiphyte name is changed. He's no longer known by his name as it appears in the college catalog, but like a monk or a knight or a Malta of St. John becomes knight so-and-so. The old knights are then known as patriarchs so-and-so. The outside world are known as Gentiles and Vandals. The catalog, that is the membership list, is because it became addresses sometimes in this century or chapter 322. However, it's made with the usual outside names and is unique and impressive. Each member has a copy bound in black leather peculiar symbols on the outside and inside. The symbols presently have some meaning. The owner's name and the single letter D is gilt stamped on the outer cover on the early issues, at least up to the mid-19th century. And then it then appears to have been omitted, at least on copies we have seen. Each right-hand page printed one side only, about 6 by 4 inches, has the members listed for 1 year and surrounded by a heavy black border. Thick in its early years, not so thick in recent decades. The symbolizing the death of the person named as he adopts his new name and new life upon entering the order. Most interesting is the entry between the decade lists of members. On the 1833 list, before the 15 founders' names, are the words period 2, decade 3. Similar before names on the 1843 list are the words period 2, decade 4. A brief period stays the same throughout the years, but the decade numbers increase by 1 in each 10 years. No doubt this means something to the order, else it wouldn't be there. Another mystical group of letters and numbers is at the top of the first list of names in 1833, which would say P.231-D.31, period. The numbers increased by 1 in each succeeding class. In 1834, for example, the entry reads P.232-D32, period. Furthermore, the first class list of 1833 had 2 blank lines in place of the 11th name on the list. This supports the argument that the society has a German origin, and this is a listing of anonymous German connections. The members of 1833, we estimate at any one time only about 1/4 of the memberships is active. Even the active quarter is not always effective or successful. Its instructions to compare to 1833 with 1983 and how over the century and a half span, a group of 20 to 30 families had emerged to dominate the order. The very first names on the very first membership list, Samuel Henshaw Bates was a private in the Union Army, went west to farm in Santa Rosa, California, at that time very much in the boondocks, and died in 1879. a life not different to millions of other Americans. In fact, out of the first 15 members, actually 14 plus the anonymous member, achievements were not much greater than we would expect from the cream of Yale College's case class, that is. Rufus Hart, H-A-R-T, spent several years in Ohio Senate. Asher Hooker Lewis was an Ohio legislator for a couple of years. Samuel Marshall was a Illinois state legislator for a while. And Frederick Monter was a New York legislator. Other members, apart from the two founders of the order, did nothing much with their lives or for the order. By contrast, the two founding members, that is William Huntington Russell and Alphonso Taft, went far. That is, William Russell was a member of the Connecticut State Legislature in 1846 to 37, a general in the Connecticut National Guard from 1862 to 70, and founded the Collegiate and Commercial Institute in New Haven, Connecticut. Alphonso Taft went further. He was a Secretary of War in 1876, the first of several members of the order to hold this post down until the 1950s. Taft became a U.S. Attorney General in 1876 to 7, then U.S. Minister to Austria in 1882 to 84, and finally U.S. Ambassador to Russia in 1884 to 1885. During the 150 years interval since 1833, active membership has evolved into a core group of perhaps 20 or 30 families. It seems that the active members have enough influence to push their sons and relatives into the order. There's significant intermarrying among the families. These families fall into two major groups. First, we find the old line, that is the American families who arrived on the East Coast in the 1600s. These families were called Whitney, Lord, Phelps, Waitsworth, Allen, Bundy, and Adams, and so on. Second, we find families who acquired wealth in the last 100, sent their sons to Yale, and in time became almost old line families. Examples are Harriman, Rockefeller, Payne, and Davison. Some families, like the Whitneys, were Connecticut Yankees and acquired wealth in the 19th century. In the last 150 years, a few families in the order have gained enormous influence in society and the world. One example is the Lord family. Two branches of this family dated from 1630. Those descended from Nathan Lord and those from Thomas Lord. Other lords arrived in the U.S. over years, but do not enter our discussion. Of these two main branches, only the Thomas Lord group appears to have contributed members to the order. Their ancestry traces to Thomas Lord, who left Essex, England in 1635 in a company led by Reverend Thompson Hooker and settled in what is now Hartford, Connecticut. In fact, part of Hartford is still known as Lord's Hill. The line of descent for the Lord's family is full of DeForest and Lockwood names because intermarrying is more than common among those elite families. The first Lord to be initiated into this order, was George DeForest Lord, 1854, a New York lawyer. Together with his family, Daniel Lord, another Yale graduate, George DeForest Lord established the New York law firm of Lord, Day, and Lord. Among his present-day clients are the New York Times and the Rubin Foundation. The Rubin Foundation is one of the financial angels for the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. Sorry. Then, in the next 100 years, 5 more lords were initiated into the order. They were Franklin Atkins Lord, that is in 1898, Williams Gatlin Lord, that is in 1922, Oswald Bates Lord, 1926, Charles Edwin Lord II, 1949, and then Winston Lord in 1959. When we ask the question, what have these members achieved and what are they doing today, a dramatic picture emerges and demonstrates it in the chart. Past lords in the order. That was 1854, George DeForest Lord. 1898, Franklin Acton Lord. 1922, William Galen Lord. Married Francis Norton and the son of Charles Edwin Lord II. In 1926, Oswald Bates Lord and married Pillsbury flower family. Son is William Winston Lord. 1949, Charles Edwin Lord II, and in 1959, Wilson Lord. Now, today, the lords today, this would be two major ones. Charles Edwin Lord, who was actually 1949, is acting comptroller of the currency in 1981. Meanwhile, Winston, who was a graduate in 1959, is the chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations in 1983. So there are two major people who have actually awards there. Memorandum number 3. How much is known about the order? The openly published literature on the order amounts to merely 2 articles over a span of 100 years. The Iconoclast, Volume 1, Number 1 only, published on October 13, 1873, and an already cited article in Esquire by the Ron Rosenbaum, published in 1977. This book and its successors are based on unpublished archival material originating with the order. The Iconoclast order, that is in October 1873, back in those days, an enterprising Yale student stunned to action because the order had taken over Yale finances and left the university near poverty, took it upon himself to publish an expose. Unfortunately, some of the anonymous students' acutest observations were buried in not so good verse. We will repent some of the verse below as in the original Iconoclast because it is impossible to summarize. The Yale College University Current and Record had a blackout policy on the order. As Iconoclast puts it, we speak through a new publication because the college press is closed to those who dare to openly mention the bones. The college press was controlled by the order from time to time. Yale newspapers were run by editors in the order, for example. One noteworthy editor of the Yale Record, also in the order, was Thomas Cochin, 1894, who went on to make a career as an influential partner in the influential banking firm of J.P. Morgan. 3 paragraphs in this anonymous publication summarize the Iconoclast accusation. First, there's a Yale secret society open only to the select few. For more than 40 years, a secret society called the Skull and Bones has existed in Yale College. You receive a certain number of men from each class. These are chosen nominally by the number of the class, although as it understands that a prominent men's influence avails for his friends and relatives through several years after his graduation. By observing the men elected from year to year, we find that they are chosen with a distinct end in view, namely that of attaining for the society the most honors. Some of these honors are given to literacy, some to wealthy men. And then it is the case. Men receive marks of distinction from Yale College or from their entire class, because of which they are taken into secret societies. Since Yale honors men, this fraternity professes to honor them also. Second, the Iconoclast states that the order has attained control of Yale, and its members care more for their society than for Yale. Out of every class Skull and Bones takes its men. They have gone out into the world and have become, in many instances, leaders in society. They have attained control of Yale. Its business is performed by them. Money paid to the college must pass into their hands and be subject to their will. No doubt they are worthy men in themselves, but the many whom they look down upon while in college cannot so far forget as they give money freely into their hands. Men in Wall Street complain that the college comes straight to them for help instead of asking each graduate for his share. The reason is found in the remark made by one of Yale's and America's first men: few will give but bonesmen, and they care far more for their society than they do for their college. Finally, the Iconoclast calls the order a deadly evil growing year by year. Year by year, the deadly evil is growing. The society was never as obnoxious to the college as it is today, and it is just this ill feeling that shuts the pockets of non-members. Never before has it shown such arrogance and self-fancy superiority. It grasps the college press, endeavors to rule it all. It does not deign to show its credentials, but clutches at power with the silence of conscience and skill. To tell the good, which Yale College has done, would be well nigh impossible. To tell the good she might do would be yet more difficult. The question then is reduced to this: on the one hand lies a source of incalculable good. On the other hand, a society guilty of serious and far-reaching crimes. It is Yale College against Skull and Bones. We ask all men as a question of right which should be allowed to live. The power of the order is put to use as behalf of the members even before they leave Yale. Here, a case from the late 19th century which predates the cases where we will present letter and suggest how long immoral use of power has prevailed within the order. So here's an article here actually sharing what we call the information. So we're going to go into this right now. And this is from them. You see, these are people who actually are at Yale College and they're actually upset about what's going on. Are not we coming to a sad state when other injustice can be done by the faculty, and when the fact that a man is a member of Skull and Bones can prejudice them in his favor? Briefly, the case which calls forth this question is this. Two members of the senior class, the one being a neutral, that is the other being a bonesman, returned at the beginning of the college year laden with several conditions, some of which upon examinations they failed to pass. Up to this point, the cases were parallel, and the leniency, if there was to be leniency, should have been shown to the neutral, who had done all that laid in his power to further the interests of the college, rather than to the bonesman, who has during his 3 years at Yale accomplished nothing that we wot of. But strange to say, the former has been suspended until the end of the term and obliged to leave town, not being permitted to pass another examination until he returns. The bonesman, on the contrary, is allowed to remain in New Haven, attends recitation daily, is called upon to recite, and will have a second examination in less than 6 weeks. Why is this distinction made? Oh, Mr. So-and-so is a special case, says a professor, a bonesman, that is. And especially, we presume, brings the fact that Mr. So-and-so wears a dead's head and crossbones upon his bosom. We understand that Mr. So-and-so claims to have been ill during vacation and offers the illness as an excuse for not passing the examination. But the neutral gentleman was also ill, as the faculty were expressly informed in a letter from his father. The circumstances are caused a very lively indignation throughout the senior class. It's certainly time for a radical reform when the gentleman who superintended our destinies, and who should be just, is nothing else, can allow themselves to be influenced by so petty a thing as a society connection. Hold on just a second here. Esquire. This is September 1977. This is pretty recent. Only one article is known to have been published within the last 100 years on the order. Unfortunately, it is superficial, almost mocking review, provides some enlightenment, but little contribution to historical knowledge. The article is The Last Secrets of Skull and Bones by Ron Rosenbaum, Esquire, September 1977. Rosenbaum is a Yale graduate attracted by the fictional possibility of a secret society out to control the world. He is apparently not aware of the political implications. The contribution is a blend of known, authentic documents and outright hearsay. On the other hand, Rosenbaum does make some notable observations. Among these are the people who have shaped America's national character since it ceased being an undergraduate power and had their undergraduate character shaped in that crypt over there, you see, the temple on the Yale campus. Another comment, when a new member is initiated into the order, tonight we will die to the world and be born again into the order, as he will thenceforth refer to it. The order is a world unto itself, in which he will have a new name and 14 new blood brothers, also with new names. And when Rosenbaum starts to inquire about the order, he is told they don't like people tampering and plying. The power of Bones is incredible. They've got their hands on every level of power in this country. You'll see, it's like trying to look into the mafia. Remember, there's a secret society too. Remember, there is a secret society too. The Esquire piece is well worth reading. It gives a side of the order that doesn't concern us too much. The address books. As the order is a secret society, it does not publish minutes of its journals, as Rosenbaum suggested. They don't like people tampering, prying. This author does, however, possess copies of the address books, which used to be called catalogs. These are the membership lists all the way back to 1832. The founding date that is in the United States. How did this material make its way into outside hands? It's possible that one or more members, although bound by oath, would not be dismayed if the story became public knowledge. That's all we will say. Other material exists. Skull and Bones is always a lively topic for Yale's conversation. Sometimes back a few practical-minded students made their own investigations. They did a break-in job at Yale Gate, a small hoard of Bones mementos, a layout diagram, and considerable embarrassment resulted. The core of the research for this book is the address books. Within these, we can reconstruct a picture of motives, objectives, and operations. The actions of individual members are already recorded in open history and archives. By determining when members enter a scene, what they did, what they argued, who they appointed, and when they faded out, we can assemble patterns and deduce objectives. Memorandum number 4. Who is in this secret society? The membership list of about 2,500 initiates into the order has very obvious features. Most members are from the eastern seaboard of the United States. As late as 1950, only 3 members resided in Los Angeles, California, but 28 members resided in New Haven, Connecticut. Members are also all males and almost all white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. In great part, they descended from English Puritan families. Their ancestors arrived in North America in the 1630s to 1660s. These Puritan families either intermarried with financial powers or invited in sons of money moguls. That is, examples of Rockefellers, Davisons, the Harrimans, whose sons became members of the order. From this preliminary information, we can derive that hypothesis 1. There exists in the United States today, and has existed since 1833, a secret society comprising members of old-line American families and representatives of financial power. The chart on page 19 presents a significant layout on this hypothesis. Full information remains for a later book. For now, we'll give details of just 2 key families, the Whitneys and the Harrimans. The Whitney family. A key family is the Whitneys, descended from English Puritans who came to the United States about 1635 and settled in Watertown, Massachusetts. 8 Whitneys have been members of the order. Of these, 3 had brief lives. Emerson Cogswell Whitney died a few months after initiation. Edward Payson Whitney disappeared in 1858, according to his biography. However, 3 Whitneys, William Collins Whitney and his 2 sons, are the core of Whitney's influence in the order, which survives today through the Harriman family and intermarriage with the Paynes, Paynes, and the Vanderbilts. Whitneys in the order. They were initiated by 1851, was again Emerson Coswell Whitney. He died in 1851, shortly after his initiation, December 1st, 1851, he passed away. In 1854, Edward Payson Whitney was medicine. He disappeared in 1858. Interesting. 1856, James Lyman Whitney, library work, that is at Boston Library. 1863, Williams Collins Whitney, Secretary of Navy from 1885 to 1899. Sorry, 1889, correct. Promoter and financier. 1878, Edward Baldwin Whitney, law, justice, New York Supreme Court. So he was a justice at the New York Supreme Court. 1882, Joseph Ernest Whitney, education, died on February 25th, 1893, so 11 years after graduation. 1894, Payne Whitney, Payne, son of W.C. Whitney. He's a financial at the Knickerbocker Trust Company. 1898, Harold Payne Whitney, son of W.C. Whitney, financier of the Guaranty Trust and Guggenheim Exploration Company. Some pretty major deals here, the last 2. Hypothesis number 1, a secret society dominated by old-line American families and new wealth has existed from 1833 to the present. And some of these are here. I'm going to list these families here, okay? So I'm going to give you the years and everything he shows here, okay? The Whitney family came here to America in 1635 in Watertown, Massachusetts. The next family he talks about is another family along 1631 called the Perkins family from Boston, Massachusetts. The next family he shares is the Stimson, Stimson, in 1635, Watertown, Massachusetts. In 1679, the Taft family came to Braintree, Braintree, Massachusetts. All these people are in Massachusetts here. It's amazing. The Wadsworth family, 1632, from Newtown, Massachusetts. The Gilman family, 1638, to Hingham, Massachusetts. The Payne family is involved with the Standard Oil. Okay, so there's one well-to-do person. Continue. The next family is the Davison family that was involved in the J.P. Morgan deal. The Pillsbury family, which is the flour milling family. Sloan family, Sloane family, was retail. The next family is Weyerhaeuser family, which is strictly in London. The next family is the Harriman family, which deals with railroads, and they were a major deal, folks, major. So you can see there's some pretty major people here. The Rockefeller family, again, Standard Oil. In 1635, the Lord family in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then we have two other families here, the Bundy family, 1635 of Boston, Massachusetts. And then we have the Phelps family from Dorchester, Massachusetts. So that concludes all of these from Whitney all the way through. So you're talking about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 16 families, major families involved. And some of these are still in existence, folks. Okay? It's like a spoke here. It shows like a wheel with a spoke. William Collins Whitney from 1841 to 1904 is a fine example of how members of the order rise to fame and fortune. W.C. Whitney was initiated in 1863 and by 1872 had only advanced his career to inspector of the schools for New York. However, in the last 3 decades of the century, he rolled up a massive fortune, became a power behind the throne, the Cleveland administration, and directed the often unscrupulous activities of a cluster of capitalists known as the Whitney Group. A brief quotation suggests the power that Whitney's amassed in the brief 30 years. This is a list of Whitney's estates at the turn of the century. That's why I recognize his name. I'll tell you more about this, folks. Here it goes. City residence in New York, a Venetian palace and 5,000 acres at the weekly WHEATLEY Hills near Jamaica, Long Island. A sheepshed bay house with a private track covering 300 acres, a mansion at Berkshire Hills, Massachusetts. With 700 acres of land, October Mountain House with a large tract of land, the Stony Fort Farms, STONY, Ford Farms in New York. Uses auxiliary to his Kentucky stock farms, the Adriatic Game Preserve of 16,000 acres, a lodge at Blue Mountains Lake with a fine golf course, a bluegrass farm of 3,000 acres in Kentucky. And where I live at, here in Aiken, South Carolina, a state at Aiken, South Carolina, comprising a mansion, race course, and 2,000 acres of hunting land. And that is true. The racetrack here I didn't even know this, folks. This just came to me. It's the Whitney racetrack. It's the track here that races the horses here in the spring with thoroughbreds. And the question, and I assume, I would like to learn more about that. Anyway, that's the Whitneys. I didn't even know, but this also, you have to understand, Aiken was a sportsman's paradise for those who were well off here in South Carolina. They would come here in the winter and would stay here until it got spring up north. And so this tells me something. This Aiken, South Carolina is known as a rich man's paradise. It is. Continue. William C. Whitney married Flora Payne, daughter of Standard Oil treasurer Oliver Payne. The Paynes are not in the order, but adding the Payne piece of the Standard Oil fortune makes Whitney's fortune that much larger. Their two sons, Harry Payne, 1894, and Payne Whitney, 1898, went to Yale and became members of the order. After Yale, Harry Payne promptly married Gertrude Vanderbilt in 1896, and on Whitney, Payne fortunes now joined some Vanderbilt money. His financial power was channeled into the Guaranty Trust, J.P. Morgan, and the Guggenheim outfits. And it gets more complicated. For example, the son of Harold Payne Whitney, Cornelius Vanderbilt Whitney, married Marie Norton. After the divorce, Mary Norton Whitney married W. Avery Harriman, his first wife, who today is 91, a key member. It is these tightly woven families and financial interlocutors that make up the core of the order. So let's look at the Harriman family. The Harriman family. In the first few days of June 1983, a prominent American, a private citizen, flew to Moscow for a confidential chat with Yuri Andropov. A State Department interpreter went along. This American was not the president, nor the vice president, nor the Secretary of State, nor any member of any of the things of Reagan administration. He was a private individual, W. Avery Harriman. The first time any American had talked with Yuri Andropov since the death of his predecessor, Brezhnev. So who is W. Avery Harriman? The older Harriman, a prominent and not too scrupulous railroad magnate, sent both his sons to Yale, William Avery in 1913 and Edward Rowland Noel Harriman in 1917. Joined the order, a good example of how old line families in the order absorbed new wealth families. Although a history has unfolded, it may be that Harriman and his fellow investment bankers have dominated the direction of the order in the past few decades. And then you have a Wall Street Journal, July 11, 1972. He's made a copy here, Tuesday. Brown Brothers Harriman and Company, private bankers, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, and St. Louis. And it talks about cash on hand, assets of $443 million, liabilities being the same thing, and then shows the partners here that are involved in it, and limited partners, complete banking, such and such. So this is Brown's brother Harriman, advertising from Wall Street. This is in 1982, folks. Sorry, 1972. Sorry. Let's continue. In the 1930s, W.A. Harriman and Company merged with Brown Brothers. This was an older financial house whose partners were also members of the order. Anders and Brown was founded in 1800 in New York and Philadelphia. By the 1970, the relatively unknown private international banking firm of Brown Brothers Harriman, which assets about $500 million, had taken in so many of the brotherhood that out of 26 individual partners, no fewer than 9 were members of the order. We don't know of any greater concentration of members. And to make it more interesting, Prescott Bush, father of George H.W. Bush, that is both in the order, was a partner in Brown Brothers Harriman for over 40 years. Finally, because Brown Brothers and Harriman is a private banking firm, it has relatively no government supervision and does not publish an annual report. In other words, we know nothing about its operations. At least we know nothing from Brown Brothers Harriman sources, that is. Here's a lineup of Brown Brothers Harriman's partners who were also members of the order in the mid-1970s. Walter H. Brown, Prescott Shelton Bush, Ranger Kent Koskinen, I'll spell that to you, Costikyan, Harold Rowland, Noel Harriman, W. Avery Harriman, Stephen Young Hort, H-O-R-D, Robert Abercrombie Lovett, John Beckham, Madden, and Knight Woodley. It's worth thinking about the concentration of names here and the powers it represents in the light of outside comments in the old order of the years. After the title page of the volumes, we reprint the verse of an anonymous Yale student of the 1870s who commented on the requirement to put the order ahead of all else. The editor of the honor class, also in the 1870s, wrote, "And on their breasts there were a sign that tells their race and name. It is the ghastly badge of death, and from his kingdom came thy son, Satan, son of sin, the enemy of man." The other writer in the 1870s called the order the Brotherhood of Death, outside already in the downward dawn, thither from the side and from that slow sweep, and settle down in silence solidly, crow-wise, the frightful Brotherhood of Death, black-hatted and black-hooded huddle, they with black crapules and dangling from each neck, so they take their grim station at the door, torches lit, skull and crossbones banners spread. Ron Rosenberg, in his 1977 Esquire article, a century later, was no less cautious. Rosenberg called it a mafia. From evidence to be presented later, this author would term the order as an international mafia, unregulated and all but unknown to the outside world. However, it's merely Brown's Brothers Harriman that is 59 years old. At 59 Wall Street, New York. But obviously, Yuri Andropov over in Moscow knows who holds the cards. Yeah, I want to tell you something about Yuri Andropov. After Brzezinski comes to power, there is a struggle after he passes away. And he takes power for only a few years, if it's even that much, and suddenly he's thrown out of office. That's what happens in communism. You don't have the support. You eventually can lose that support. You can have it, and then you can lose it. The British connection to this particular order. Some well-read readers may raise a question. How does the order and its families relate to Cecil Rhodes' secret society, that is the Milner's Round Table, the Illuminati, and the Jewish secret society's equivalents? How do these fit into the picture? We are concerned here only with the core of purely American phenomena with German origins. It is undoubtedly linked to overseas groups. The link between the order and Britain go through Lazar Freres, Freres. Yes, that name is well known. As I think I've read that many times in the books by, oh, I can't think of his name all of a sudden. It'll come to me. Oh, Eustace Mullins talks about him. Eustace Mullins. And the private merchant bankers. Notably, the British establishment was also founded at the university, that is Oxford University, and especially All Souls College at Oxford. The British element is called the Group. The Group links to the Jewish equivalent throughout the Rothschilds in Britain. Lord Rothschild was a original members of Rhodes' Inner Circle. The order in the U.S. links to the Guggenheim, that is Skill. Sorry. The order to the U.S. links to the Guggenheim, Schiff, and Warburg families. They were no Jews at all in the order until very recently. In fact, the order has, a Rosenbaum suggests, some definite and anti-Semitic tendencies. Token Jews and token blacks have been omitted in recent years. There is an Illuminati connection. Some details are in the Esquire article. More details will be in our future volumes. All these groups have cooperated and competitive features, but to argue that all the world's ills can be ascribed to any one of these groups is false. The core of the order, like the core of the group in England, comprises about 20 families. In the U.S. case, they are mostly descendants from the original settlers in Massachusetts. UWELT did not enter the order until the mid-19th centuries, until recently has been that way. On the other hand, key families, that is the Whitneys and the Harrimans, are linked to their own banking interests. In many ways, these old-line Yankee families, in fact, almost everyone I shared with you was from the state of Massachusetts or either New York City. These old-line Yankee families have outsmarted the bankers. The Puritans diverted bankers' wealth to their own objectives without always absorbing the bankers' families. The order controls the substantial wealth of the Andrew Carnegie, but no Carnegie has ever been a member of the order. The order used to Ford wealth, that's Ford, so flagrantly against the wishes of the Ford family that two Fords resigned from the board of the Ford Foundation. No Ford has been a member of the order. The name Morgan has never appeared on the membership list either, although some Morgan partners are with the inner core, for example, Davison and Perkins. Interestingly, the Astro name is prominent in the group in England, but not in the order in the United States. Memorandum number 5. What organizations has it penetrated? The order has either set up or penetrated just about every significant research, policy, and opinion-making organization in the United States, in addition to the church, business, law, government, and politics. Not all at the same time, but persistently and consistently enough to dominate the direction of American society. The evolution of American society is not and has not been for a century or voluntary development reflecting individual opinion, ideas, and decisions at the grassroots. On the contrary, the board directions has created artificial and stimulated by the order. Not all organizations know they have been penetrated or used for another purpose. It's a situation very much as Quigley, that is see page 30, found in the group. There is an inner core, intimate associates who unquestionably knew that they were members of a group devoted to a common purpose, and outer circles of a larger number on whom the inner circle acted by personal persuasion, factors distribution, and social pressures. In the probable that most members of the outer order were not conscious that they were being used by a secret society. Therefore, my hypothesis number 2 is the order has penetrated or been the dominant influence, that is, in sufficient policy, research, and opinion-making organizations that it determines the basic direction of the American society. This order has had enormous effect, that is, it has penetrated every segment of American society. It's actually penetrated the White House, the executive branch. It's also penetrated the law. It's also penetrated in the law areas, also in education, media, publishing, also in business, industry, and commerce. Also has penetrated the areas of churches, depending on the denominations. It's also been involved in the banking, that is the Federal Reserve System, and it's also been involved with the think tanks, policy groups, that is, and also involved in political affairs, such as being a legislator or politician. The order is the original impulse. One observation is that the order gets the ball rolling in new organizations, i.e. puts it in the first president or chairman and the ideas, and then when operations are rolling along, often just fades out of the picture. Among universities we can cite is Cornell University, where Andrew Dickinson White was its first president, and Johns Hopkins University, based on the German educational system, where Daniel Colt Gilman in 1852 was the first president in 1875 to 1901. Among academic associations, the American Historical Society, the American Economic Association, the American Chemical Society, the American Psychological Society, the American Psychological Association were all started by members of the order or persons close to the order. These are key associations for the conditioning of society. This phenomenon of the order as the first on the scene is found especially among foundations, although it appears that the order keeps a continual presence among foundation trustees. It does more than just be first, that is, where money is considered or concerned. It stays around to keep an eye on expenditures. The first president of the Carnegie Institution, that is 1902 to 1905, was Daniel Colt, C-O-I-T, Gilman, but other members of the orders have been on Carnegie boards since the turn of the century. Gilman was on the scene for the founding of the Peabody, Slater, and Russell Sage Foundation. George Bundy was president of the Ford Foundation from 1966 to 1979. The first chairman of an influential but almost unknown organization established in 1910 was also a member of the order. In 1920, Theodore Marlborough founding the American Society for Judicial Settlements of International Dispute, but Marlborough was only president, you see. The first chairman was member William Howard Taft, 1878. The society was the forerunner of the League to Enforce the Peace, which developed the League of Nations concept and ultimately into the United Nations. Wow. In the United Nations, we find, for example, that Archibald MacLeish was the brains behind the constitution of the UNESCO organization. We find the same first on the scene phenomena in think tanks. In 1960, James Jeremiah Wadsworth set up the Peace Research Institute. In 1963, this was merged to become the Institute for Policy Studies, along with Marcus, M-A-R-C-U-S, Ruskin, who has been National Security Council aide from 1961 to 63. Then to George Bundy, that is the graduate of 1940, a very active member of the order. And I'm going to stop here and we'll go into the areas of the church and law and other areas here, but I need a sip of water. So we'll stop at this point. It's been a little while here. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. I want to share this with you guys. It's important. Again, these are some of the cogs that have actually had the apparatus of dealing with this group, what's happening in the United States. They are not the major group, in my opinion. There are others, but they are an important cog of it. So thank you for being here, and we'll be back with more from Mr. Antony Sutton's book here, American Secret Establishments. Thank you.